Chapter 3 Ponyville Part 2. The loud clangs of a falling hammer filled Twilight's ears while she looked around the interior of the dark, soot-filled blacksmith's shop. Applejack walked beside her. When they reached Ponyville, Rainbow and Pinky had split off to find them a place to stay the night. Spike had wanted to go with them, so Twilight had let him. Also, she had entrusted the task of selling off the trinkets and bolts of dispelling they had acquired to Pinky's haggling skills. Meanwhile, Twilight and Applejack hunted for information in the blacksmith's shop. "I'm gonna wait until he's finished working to chat," Applejack said over the noise. Twilight nodded and trotted over to one of the walls to inspect the blacksmith's wares. Horseshoes, chainmail, hoof maces, axes, spears, swords, and plow blades were all on display. She glanced over her shoulder when a shower of sparks shot up near the forge in the back. 2 ponies and a donkey worked metal, wielding heavy hammers on their hoods and tongs in their mouths. Out of curiosity, Twilight tested the axe's sharpness with the sensitive pad at the base of her hoof. The edge scraped across her skin, shearing away a couple of tiny hairs where her coat began. The blacksmith did good work. She tapped the axe firmly with her hoof in satisfaction. She jumped when the axe head cracked off the shaft and landed on the dirt floor with a dull thud. Her ears swiveled back when she sensed someone behind her, and she realized that the sound of clanging hammers was gone. A tan earth pony stallion in a blacksmith's apron with a 3-horseshoe mark on his flank looked at the axe head on the ground with disappointment. Twilight's head drooped with shame. "I'm sorry, I'll pay for it," she said. The caramel-coated stallion raised his eyebrows at her. "I'm not the one you should be apologizing to." He stepped to the side and pointed toward a donkey standing next to Applejack. "This is his shop."
I won't take a single bit from you," the donkey grumbled. "Not your fault that what's supposed to be steel behaves like porcelain."
"How is this possible?"
Twilight said.
"If it's so brittle, wouldn't it break while you were hammering it into shape?"
"As I was saying," Applejack cut in, "Cranky, this is Twilight. We're curious about the rumors floating around involving the Appalachian mines." Cranky nodded.
You'd think it would break the moment I took a hammer to it, wouldn't you? Wrong. Your carted in from Appaloosa looks perfectly fine. Smelts into fine steel, then bam! Couple days after I smelt it, it falls apart.
Twilight rubbed one of her hooves across her chin.
So there's nothing wrong with the ore? And you're not smelting it any differently?
Cranky humphed.
No, there's definitely something wrong with the ore. Whatever it is, it can't be seen.
"Do you know anything else?" Applejack asked.
"If I did, I'd tell you." Cranky shot back at her. "Why don't you go ask a pony like Rarity? He's much better informed about trade relations with the Empire. All I know is how to use a hammer and work some steel."
"Right. We'll let you get back to work," Applejack said quickly, and herded Twilight out the door before they broke Cranky's patience. After they were outside, Applejack started to grumble. "Sounds like a bit of voodoo trickery to me. I reckon the buffalo were involved, trying to drive the good settlers out by taking away their mine," she said as they trotted down the cobblestone streets to the town center, where they'd all planned to meet. Twilight rolled her eyes.
"Voodoo isn't a real thing. However, it is extremely likely that magic is somehow involved."
"Voodoo? Magic? What's the difference?" Applejack said.
"Well, voodoo involves superstitious rituals that don't actually work."
She paused, considering.
"You know what? You're right, the difference is semantics."
"Of course I'm right," Applejack stated smugly.
"Other than that, voodoo doesn't work and things like wizardry do. And it doesn't meet the practical definition of magic,"
Twilight quickly added. "Oh, really? And what book did you read that in, Miss Smarty Pants?"
"Practical Forms of Magic by..."
Twilight frowned.
"Wait, what's your point?"
Did you stop and consider that whoever wrote the book didn't have any more experience with the topic in question than you?
Applejack said.
She was a well-respected scholar,
Twilight said, her nose in the air.
Did you know the author? Did she ever try to practice voodoo? How'd you get so knowledgeable about voodoo anyway if she were a stuffy scholar and weren't a member of a buffalo or zebra tribe?
Applejack said. Twilight paused to consider her response.
Well, no. The book didn't mention where she got her information, but it was in a book in Candlekeep. It must be true,
she protested. Applejack stopped and gave Twilight a hard look.
Look, Twi, all I'm saying is that before you accept something to be true, there needs to be good reason to believe it. You gotta think for yourself. Unless you have reason to believe something and you know what the evidence is, then maybe it's true, and maybe it ain't.
I do have reason to believe it. It's in a book,
Twilight argued.
Did you ask someone who actually has experience with the world and wasn't making assumptions about something they didn't understand?
Well, it never came up with Star Swirl, but
I happen to have it on good authority from someone who has seen the world that voodoo has very real powers just like wizardry,
Applejack said, interrupting.
Your respectable scholar was making stuff up.
She wouldn't.
All right, maybe she believed what she said.
Applejack shrugged.
Now, don't make it true.
Applejack turned and continued down the tree-lined street. Twilight opened her mouth to argue some more, but she found that she had nothing left to say.
What if the author hadn't done her research?
She considered. Finally, she snorted and quickly trotted to catch up with Applejack. Ponyville had an appreciably sized town center with an open-air market where farmers and craftsmen alike sold their wares. Twilight judged from the architectural style and the citizens they passed that Ponyville was a primarily Earth Pony town. She spotted the recognizable frizz of Pinkie Pie's mane above the crowd and pointed her out to Applejack. When they approached, they found Pinkie midway through haggling the price of a gem. Rainbow Dash leaned up against an empty stall with a nonchalant, bored expression. Spike hovered around the Pegasus's hooves. He looked around the town with interest, and he drew a few curious glances in return.
12 bits!
Pinkie shouted.
9 bits,
the merchant said.
12 bits!
9 bits!
9 bits!
12 bits!
Deal!
Pinkie giggled and snatched her 12-bit share of currency.
What? Hey, that's not fair!
The merchant protested. Pinkie blew the merchant a raspberry while she shoveled the coins into her pouch.
A deal's a deal,
she said. Twilight eyed the swollen coin pouch around Pinkie's neck.
Looks like she's doing pretty well,
she whispered to Applejack. Applejack nodded.
Right. And if you're noticing that, some pony else is bound to be. Ponyville's a peaceful place, but even so, there's any number of cut purses in this market. We better get indoors.
Applejack was prophetic. As soon as the Earth Pony finished speaking, Twilight saw Pinkie's bag lift off her neck, caught in a sparkling blue aura.
What? Hey!
Pinkie cried.
That's mine!
She took off after the bag. It danced through the crowd, forcing Pinkie to dive under ponies' bellies and prance across their backs to keep up. Numerous ponies shouted complaints as she blazed past, under, and over them. Rainbow shot into the air to get a vantage above the crowd. She hovered, only slightly favoring her injured wing, and pointed.
There!
She leaned into forward flight.
I'll stay above the thief,
she called down. Applejack galloped after her, pushing roughly through the crowd.
Out of the way! I got a thief to catch!
She warned the ponies ahead of her. The crowd fearfully opened a path for the armed and armored Applejack.
Sorry,
Twilight said to a downed pony she passed while trailing after Applejack. Twilight noticed Rainbow zip around a corner into a side street. When she and Applejack rounded the corner after her, they found the Pegasus hovering again, looking around in confusion.
Where did the thief go?
Applejack shouted.
I don't know,
Rainbow yelled.
I had her, but then I lost her. I got her!
Pinkie called from a shadowy crevasse between two buildings. She emerged from the darkness, dragging a white unicorn with a purple mane and tail toward the rest of the group. Pinky wore her coin bag proudly around her neck.
Put me down, you barbarian!
The unicorn wailed, ineffectually pounding on Pinky's side with her pristine white hooves. She closed her eyes and her horns started to glow, and so Pinky bonked her squarely between the eyes, and the light went out. The unicorn whimpered, and Twilight winced in sympathy. Pinky unceremoniously dumped the unicorn on the ground in front of the other two ponies. Rainbow settled beside them.
Rarity?
Applejack said in confusion. Twilight blinked in surprise. The unicorn Applejack called Rarity did not at all fit the image of the villainous cutpurse she imagined in her mind. Despite the dust clinging to her coat and mane, she was immaculately groomed. She also held herself with an air of importance, even after being dragged across the street by Pinky. Rarity rubbed her forehead in discomfort, then picked herself up off the dusty cobblestone.
Oh, you are so lucky that you snuck up on me,
she growled at Pinky.
Rarity, why are you taking Pony's coin purses?
Applejack said.
You run a business, you're not a street urchin.
Oh, why, Applejack? It's good to see that you've associated with these proto-ponies,
Rarity said.
A lady has to do what a lady has to do. Surely you understand?
That ain't no excuse for theft,
Applejack told her.
How does that saying go? There ain't no rest for the wicked. I've got to make ends meet, Applejack. I haven't made a sale in weeks. Nobody wants to commission something as valuable as my services with so many highway robbers stalking the Sword Coast.
She gestured at Pinky and Rainbow while she spoke.
When I saw these two ruffian adventurers poking around the market like they owned the place with their strange little pet, I followed them until the right opportunity. Money like what the pink one is carrying could cover my expenses for a week.
She then added an assurance.
You know, I would never steal from good, hard-working Ponyville folks.
Applejack sighed.
Times are rough for every pony, Rarity. I can understand that a pony with your line of work has it pretty hard, though.
Ooh, is she an escort?
Pinky said.
No!
Rarity screeched indignantly.
Absolutely not! I'm a seamstress! I make dresses!
She means she smuggles Empire gems into Manhattan, terror-free, disguised as party dresses,
Applejack corrected.
Oh, smuggling is such an ugly word,
Rarity said.
I prefer to call it open commerce.
Isn't that a bit illegal?
Rainbow said.
Technically, no, because I sell dresses, not gems. Either way, I pay my Ponyville taxes like every pony else. All the Empire Lords would do with the money they embezzle off of the trade is spend more on ridiculous magic institutions and their military interests.
Rarity explained.
Speaking of trading,
Twilight interjected.
What do you know about the problems with the Appaloosan iron? That awful business. What I hear ranges from the Empire is trying to cripple the Flaming Wings military equipment and leave Manhattan ripe for invasion to the Appaloosa mine is simply out of good ore. Either way, Manhattan merchants are talking about a trade embargo, but that would be bad for every pony involved,
Rarity said.
With abandoned presence on the road, though, I'm not sure if an embargo would make much of a difference. Why are they talking about one, then?
Twilight asked.
Because it's leverage. Manhattan moves a lot of goods out of its harbor to other places in the world, more goods than Canterlot, but the ponies in power there are terrified of the Empire sweeping in and taking everything. Without trade, tensions are high. The Empire wants to send in troops to secure the coast road, but Manhattan doesn't want Empire armies anywhere near them. Where did you hear all of this?
Twilight asked. Rarity waved her hoof.
Oh, around. Merchants mostly. I also have a business partner who writes from Manhattan.
All right. That's all we need to know. You best get out of here, Rarity, before I change my mind and turn you in for theft. And don't let me catch you doing it again, Applejack said.
Oh, you won't,
Rarity said with a sly wink. She trotted down the road and paused before turning a corner to call.
Oh, and one more thing. There's a group of merchants called the Iron Circle. Without Appaloosa, they have a monopoly. I'll bet anything that they're somehow involved.
Then she was gone. Spike ran up beside Twilight, panting.
Who was that?
He wheezed.
Rarity.
Twilight answered.
You left me behind,
He said when he caught his breath.
and I missed her.
He stared wistfully at the corner Rarity had disappeared behind.
She's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Pinky giggled.
You silly. You could have just disappeared and returned next to Twilight.
Spike moaned.
Oh, why didn't I think of that? This familiar thing is hard.
Applejack patted him on the shoulder.
Don't feel too bad. You're too good for a miscreant like her anyway.
I have the feeling we'll be seeing her again.
Twilight said. It was edging into the evening hours when the 4-pony group, plus one familiar, sat at the end of the bar in an establishment named Berry Punch's Tavern. Pinky had rented them a couple of rooms before the incident in the marketplace.
Market seemed pretty crowded this afternoon.
Applejack said as she took a mug of cider from the barkeep.
Any idea why?
The barkeep nodded as he scrubbed the counter with a dirty rag. Yep. Folks from the farms around here have all taken a trip into town this weekend to see the carnival. And here the headline act is pretty something special. He reached under the bar. Here, they pay me to pass out flyers. He placed a well-scribed poster on the bar in front of Applejack. Rainbow tapped Twilight on the shoulder and whispered in her ear.
The group at the table behind us have been watching you since you came in. Do you know them?
Twilight turned her head to glance behind them.
No, don't look!
Rainbow hissed. But Twilight had already taken the glance. She glimpsed 2 earth ponies, a unicorn, and a griffin sitting around the table playing cards. One of the earth ponies wore plate barding not unlike Applejack's. The griffin wore leather, and the other earth pony wore chainmail. The unicorn looked like a wizard. And one of them saw her look.
What do you make of this, Twilight?
Applejack asked her innocently while she gestured at the poster on the bar. A chair clattered to the floor behind them. Twilight cringed.
Shoot, forgot about the bounty thing. We're about to get in a fight, aren't we?
Applejack said. Twilight nodded. Spike vanished. Twilight heard the sound of weapons being readied behind them, and Rainbow kicked off the bar with a shout. She looped through the air, using her hooves to bounce off the ceiling and come down in a flanking position on the opposite side of the group at the table. Applejack bucked her stool behind her, and it crashed into the unicorn and sent him sprawling beneath the table. Pinky jumped up onto the bar, ready, and Twilight drew Solstice as she turned and held the blade in front of herself in a guarded stance. Twilight saw the heavily armored earth pony lunging toward her, and she froze for an instant. Then her survival instincts took over, and she sidestepped the powerful stroke of his hoof axe. With a tremendous crash, the axe bit into the wood of the bar. The pony wielding it expertly twisted it free, but Twilight took the brief opportunity to stab the tip of her floating blade into his flank just beneath the plate. Solstice easily punctured his chainmail, drawing blood. Pinky pummeled him from above as he limped back, and her forehoof thudded solidly into the plate on his forehead. Twilight saw his eyes cross momentarily from the blow, and he staggered, wounded and disoriented. A bright flash of sparks drew her eyes to where Rainbow battered an earth pony and chainmail with her wing blades. He wore 2 kite shields, one across his foreleg and one across his back, allowing him to hold off Rainbow's precise spinning strikes, but each arcing glance of her wing blades against his shield pushed him back. His eyes began to glow, and Twilight noticed him mouthing a prayer.
Oh no, you don't!
She thought. She concentrated for a moment, bringing magic to the surface of her mind, and shot a quick spell out of her horn. 2 violet balls of energy zipped across the room with unerring accuracy. They passed through the cleric's chainmail as though it wasn't even there, and burned him with pure magical energy. Twilight noted with satisfaction that the glow in his eyes faded. Her spell had interrupted his concentration. Twilight then heard a crash, and an instant later wooden splinters glanced off her mage armor. She looked at the source of the sound. Applejack had sundered a table with her chain. The wizard huddled behind the broken pieces of the table, horn aglow, and before Applejack could strike again, he finished a spell. With a pulse of light from his horn, he vanished into thin air. Applejack refocused her attention on the cleric as she readied her next attack.
Twilight, eyes up!
Rainbow warned as her wing blade glanced off the cleric's shield. With only a split second to spare, Twilight adjusted her guard up. Her eyes widened when she saw the griffin descending upon her from the rafters. He swung a cutlass at her with his right talon. Solstice moved partially of its own accord to parry the blow, saving Twilight from the ambush. Beyond the griffin, Twilight saw the recovered heavily armored earth pony moving in to join the assault. But before he could, a pink blur slammed into his side, and Pinky tackled him to the ground. In the following seconds, Twilight barely held her own against the griffin. He was fast and ruthless, and every time she blocked the sword in his right talon, the claws of his left would follow. Her mage armor saved her from several blows, but she still received deep lacerations on both her shoulders and the side of her neck. While Twilight fought the griffin, she saw Applejack's chain puncture the cleric's shield and skewer his foreleg. Before the shock and pain left his eyes, Rainbow spattered his blood on the wall with a stroke of her wing. He fell, gasping, his throat cut open. Twilight backpedaled as the griffin pressed his advantage until her rear end hit a wall. With nowhere left to maneuver, she locked Solstice against his cutlass to stop him from finishing her. Before his talons could rake her again, a blue blur collided with him. Rainbow hit forehooves first, striking the griffin in the side. Twilight heard his ribs crack. Wrapped together, the two winged combatants tumbled against the bar. Twilight caught sight of the wizard when he appeared behind Applejack, his horn lit with a spell.
Applejack!
She shouted. Applejack turned to look at Twilight, and the wizard touched his energized horn to her flank. Applejack's jaw clenched as electrified sparks jumped across her armor. Spasming, she fell to the floor of the tavern. Twilight felt something shift within her when she saw Applejack fall. Her thoughts only held room for actions. No hesitation, no mercy, and no regret. She rushed forward at the wizard and made a looping strike with Solstice, sending it out ahead and then drawing it back. The floating blade cleanly severed the unicorn's head from his shoulders, leaving his features forever frozen in an expression of terror. Unfazed, Twilight turned back to the griffin. He had gained the upper hand against Rainbow. His sword lay forgotten on the floor of the tavern, useless in the close quarters fight. Rainbow lay on her back, battling the griffin back with bats of her wings and strong kicks, unable to make effective swinging strokes with her wing blades. As the griffin's talons descended toward Rainbow's neck, Twilight unleashed a spell. She inserted a phantasm into the griffin's mind, changing the struggling pony beneath him into an unimaginable monstrosity of pure terror. He scrambled back in panic. It only lasted for an instant, but Rainbow only needed an instant. She spun on the floor and slashed the griffin across the chest with her wing. 2 more blows, and he stopped moving entirely. Twilight turned her attention to the final target, the earth pony in armor. But he lay motionless, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Pinky straddled his back, tears freely flowing down her face. Twilight levitated a healing potion out of her saddlebag and set it down next to Applejack.
Give that to her,
she ordered Rainbow, who nodded and rushed to Applejack's side. Twilight sat down on her haunches next to Pinky.
Pinky? You did what you had to do, Pinky.
She said softly. Pinky sniffled.
It was fun until I had to kill some pony.
She turned to Twilight, burying her face in the unicorn's chest. Her wet cheeks dampened Twilight's fur.
How do you do it, Twilight? How do you kill a pony and then just walk away?
Twilight wrapped a foreleg around Pinky and held her dearest friend close.
I don't know, Pinky. I don't know.